Welcome to Star Cares, a weekly program that delves into the issues that impact you and your family. This program is a public affairs feature of this radio station. Now here's your host, Michael Leach.
Dr. Chloe Carmichael, a licensed clinical psychologist and author of Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, says that while the pandemic has been a source of stress for everyone, if you are goal-oriented, that to-do list, die-hard overachiever, or overanalyzer, you may be experiencing more anxiety than the average person. Even before the term COVID-19 had entered our vocabulary, burnout and stress and anxiety were significant issues in the workplace and in our society in general. But Dr. Chloe suggests that there are tools at our disposal that can help us to harness this energy and help us to live a more productive and fulfilling life. Dr. Chloe, good morning and welcome to Star Cares.
Good morning, Michael. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you so much. You've written a resource entitled Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. What motivated that writing?
That's an interesting question, Michael. So my practice in New York City was focused on people with a lot of nervous energy. Of course, in New York, there's kind of a frenetic energy. But what I found is that actually the most successful people that I was encountering were not free of anxiety. They were just people who knew how to use that anxiety and channel it into energy and do something constructive with it. And so that's why I just decided to take all the techniques and ways that we've been doing that and put it into a book so that people who may not have the resources to come in for an office visit could just get the help anytime, anywhere.
So let's talk about this term, nervous energy. How would you describe nervous energy? And then how can you use it to be productive and fulfilled?
A nervous energy is really that little tickle that anxiety gives us. So the healthy function of anxiety is actually to stimulate preparation behaviors, right? Mother Nature gave us that for a reason. And so instead of just registering that as anxiety, like it's a bad thing, and then getting stressed about stress or anxious or ruminating, instead we can say, oh, what is that little boost of energy, that little bit of adrenaline, that little burst of focus, which is actually another feature of anxiety, to say, how can I use that nervous energy in a constructive way towards my goals the way Mother Nature intended it?
In your resource, you refer to successful people as quote unquote high-functioning people. What are high-functioning people? And could you be a high-functioning person and not even know it?
100%, Michael. So in fact, I would say probably 99% of the cases when I talked to someone and told them they were high functioning, they were actually surprised. High functioning is just a psychology term that describes what many of us, including Michael, I'm guessing you and probably many of your listeners, think of as just what's normal, right? So a person who can say set an alarm clock and be somewhere on time, or who has at least a few good basic relationships, or who is able to live in a way that they can, take care of themselves and keep their home in a way where it's safe to live, as far as just keeping things somewhat tidy and that kind of thing. I think it's really important to frame it that way, because a lot of times people would come to see me and they'd be kind of beside themselves with anxiety and almost feel like something was wrong with them. And I would say, okay, now wait a minute. Let's look at the bigger picture here. You graduated from school, you have a job, you have a relationship. You're someone who can learn skills and who can stick with things. And we just have to take that same power that you have and use it on whatever is the current stressor that's bringing you into my office today.
So most of us have a to-do list. You suggest that the to-do list is not just really benign, but often it comes with emotions that are attached to it.
Yeah, so the emotions are actually wonderful. So when we have a to-do list, as you said, which many people do, I find that a lot of high-functioning people have one of two things happen. They either suddenly start procrastinating on their to-do list, or they feel like they're doing everything on the to-do list, but they're kind of like a hamster on a wheel, just going through the steps and not really feeling connected with them. And so what I like to do then is say, well, let's reconnect with the emotions here, because one of the strengths, actually, again, of high-functioning people is that they can put their emotions aside and just do what needs to be done. And that's a strength, that we can go too far with it to the point where we lose touch with the emotions around what we're doing. And that can work in positive ways. For example, we can lose touch with positive emotions, like if you're going to take your mom grocery shopping, but you're just feeling kind of disconnected from some of the emotions that a person might feel, even like feeling proud of yourself for being able to take your mom to do this, or even just feeling excited about the chance to spend some time together. We can just get so focused on the productivity part that we lose touch with the emotions part. So that's one way that just getting in touch with the emotions around our to-do list can actually create a more enriching day. On the other side, sometimes we actually block out negative emotions, and that can cause that procrastination. So, for example, I had a client that was supposed to be helping his mother clean out the attic, and he kept postponing it, and he was feeling like a terrible son. Why am I not helping her? And then when we looked at what is the emotion that you feel about that task, he said, well, honestly, it's fear. Because he was actually at a place where helping his mom clean out the attic, he thought, does that mean we're getting close to the end? I'm not ready to be without my mom. And so when he could connect with the fact that he was putting it off because he was afraid of it, that empowered him to do the next step on that, which is to have a self-care plan. So when he could recognize he was postponing it because he was afraid of losing his mom, he could take that awareness and then do a legacy interview where he actually set up a video camera, asked his mom to tell him all the best stories and memories, just that oral history interview, and he could convert that fear of losing his mom into a constructive self-care action around that fear. And that was very freeing and liberating for him.
So I know that we've defined high-functioning people, Dr. Chloe, but what are the contrasts to high-functioning?
Well, in contrast, for example, would be someone who's in and out of psychiatric inpatient units, right? And I've worked, by the way, with many people like, lower functioning people in my training. And I just want to be very clear. I'm not at all saying that higher functioning people are, quote, better than lower functioning people by any stretch. Cognitively disabled adults and people who just really are not in a position where they're able to care for themselves. They're often lovely people, and I've had some of my best experiences. But as a psychologist, I do think it's important to recognize that the types of techniques that are going to be helpful to someone who's higher functioning are going to be different from the types of techniques that somebody who's lower functioning might need.
You outline 9 anxiety tools to help people sort of harness that anxiety for the good. I think we need help with that. Can you just identify maybe the top tools?
Sure. Well, the top tools I think are going to be different for everybody, which is one of the things that I want people to understand is the first way that we can harness the power of the anxiety is to first really understand what the anxiety is about, right? So sometimes we have an anxious energy that's about, just needing to calm down. Like we've been through a really big meeting, we've prepared for it, we've done it, the meeting is over, and our mind is just stuck on that meeting. Then we're going to need a technique like the mental short list, which is really good for just helping to put something out of your mind. And on the other hand, if you were preparing for the meeting and it had not happened yet, a technique like the mental short list, which would divert your mind onto other topics, would be the wrong technique to use, because sometimes we need to actually make sure we zero in and stay on a topic. So that's why the first technique is actually one about mindfulness, where we learn to study and just observe the anxiety. But let's just suppose that you were in that situation where the meeting was over, your mind was stuck on replaying that meeting in your mind, and you just needed to stop it, right? Same thing for maybe after you've been through a breakup, you've analyzed it to death, and you just need to stop thinking about that person. In that situation, what we do for the mental short list, we come up with a new mental short list for our mind to think about. And we come up with 5 really good, juicy topics that we know are going to be exciting and interesting. It could be anything from getting a jump on your holiday and anniversary shopping to, maybe if you're in the church choir, going and practicing, some of the songs that you need to remember. It could be some work projects. But the idea is that you need to really come up with 5 good topics that you know will be interesting for you and actually write them down. Because the thing is that when we feel that urge to ruminate, to just stay on some old topic that we know is just a dead end for us, because of that anxiety, our vision actually gets more narrow. And in those moments, it's hard for us to even think of other things that we could be focusing on instead. So writing out your good mental short list in advance helps you to pivot off of the old topic and onto stuff that's going to be much better and more fulfilling for you. Another one I really like is called worry time. So a lot of, very high-functioning people tend to have very active minds. And, worry in its positive sense, again, is actually just a concern about the future, right? Thinking about the future and what we can do about it. High-functioning people can sometimes go a little bit haywire with that. Like they'll be standing in line at the grocery store and they'll be thinking everything from, do I need to clean the gutters on my roof to, have I done my end-of-life planning? And, I wonder when my next annual dermatology appointment is supposed to take place. Their mind is just going a million miles an hour. They tend to either do one of two things then. They either just get caught up going down all these little mental rabbit holes, thinking about each one and exhausting themselves in line at the grocery store, or they'll get really mad at themselves and say, why can't I just stop thinking about all this stuff? Why can't I just be in the moment? What's wrong with me? And I hate to see them have that inner critic be so harsh on them. And so the happy middle ground to make good use of the fact that you do have an active mind that maybe is thinking of legitimate issues, but that you don't want to think them all through right there at the grocery store, is we have an event in our calendar called Worry Time. And it's a recurring calendar event. For some people, it's 15 minutes a day. For some people, it's an hour a week, whatever's best. And then whenever you kind of get pinged with those random worry thoughts, you just deposit them into the event details of the calendar event. And then at your appointed time, you can focus on those with your undivided attention and really give them the attention that they deserve without having to waste all of your mental energy, keeping them in your working memory and just pondering them ad hoc as they come up during the week.
Dr. Chloe, often as things happen in our lives, we are quick reactors. And there's something that you talk about, which is response prevention. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, definitely. And that can be very frustrating, again, because with high-functioning people, our minds do work very quickly, Michael. So just like you said, we tend to have these little habits where, when the stimulus happens, when situation A happens, I always do such and such, right? For example, people who maybe went through a breakup and they hear a song about their ex, or maybe they have to walk by their ex's house every day on their way to the subway, and they always think of them. And so that's the stimulus. And the response is to start texting the person. And so when we have a problematic response that we know is actually not really what we want to do, that's when the response prevention technique can come in really handy. So for example, I had a client that was struggling with something like that, where she just felt the urge to keep reaching out to her ex every time certain things would come up that would make her think of him. And so she had to find a way to prevent that response. And that could be anything from, she would sometimes FedEx her phone to herself overnight with a morning delivery, just to get it sent to her.
Wow.
Or, taking steps to have herself locked out of her phone account so that she couldn't look up her old phone numbers and reach out to exes and those types of things. I know that it can be very frustrating when we kind of always fall back onto these little old habits that we're trying to break. But the beauty of it, the silver lining about habits, is that they're predictable, right? And so if there's something, that we always do that we want to stop doing, the beauty of it is that we can think in advance about saying, how could I set it up so that it would be literally impossible for me to do that thing. Kind of a classic example is like, for many people, they'll literally put their credit card in a bucket of water and then put that in the freezer so that they literally cannot get to their credit card when they know that they have a problem with compulsive spending. That would be kind of a classic example of response prevention. If you knew that the Home Shopping Network was going to have a bonanza shopping event and you really didn't want to go crazy, you would do something to make it impossible for yourself. That's what the response prevention is about.
And then sometimes we just need to anchor ourselves. A little bit of self-talk with some anchoring statements.
Anchoring statements are really great for people who have the problem of their mind going completely blank, especially for high-functioning people who are very intellectual. To have their mind freeze and go completely blank is just really unnerving for them. So with anchoring statements, they're going to be deliberately very simple statements that you have memorized to the point like the alphabet, so that even if your mind was blank, you could probably still say the alphabet. And so whatever type of situation you know makes your mind go blank, they would have a pre-crafted statement like, I'm healthy, I'm strong, and I will get care if I need it. Something very simple so that you can start thinking logically about the situation.
Dr. Chloe, how can we learn more and how can we get a copy of your resource?
You can go to nervousenergybook.com for free goodies and things like that.
nervousenergybook.com. Dr. Chloe Carmichael, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Michael, it was a pleasure.
And thank you for listening. Won't you join me again next Sunday morning, 6:45 a.m. for another edition of Star Cares? I'm Michael Leach, and I am praying that the rest of your day is wonderful.
Star Cares is a public affairs feature of this station.